Hi there, welcome to Hud's History. Today's video looks at the global crisis, which was the global depression, which took effect at the end of the 1920s and into the 1930s. As you can see behind me, that is the breadline and work line for people trying to find work within the depression. So we're going to look at what caused the depression and what impact did it have on societies. We're also going to take a look at what was going on in Germany in the 1920s before it hit the depression, because it had its own economic issues going after World War I. So follow along. If you like the video, make sure you like it. Make sure you subscribe. You can see the other videos that are going on. The global crisis was this worldwide depression that happens due to what goes on in the United States. We're looking at this time period that happens after World War I and into the 1920s, when everything seemed to be going pretty well until October of 1929. What happened? Well, the US stock market is going to crash, and the US economy is going to kind of tumble and kind of take along with it the rest of the global market. Why is that? Well, because of World War I, the industry of the United States had fired up to help support the Allies. And then when, of course, the United States gets involved in World War I, it needs to produce a mass amount of things for its own soldiers. So this engine of industry helps to basically explode the US economy, and it becomes kind of like this powerhouse for the rest of the global economy. Unfortunately, when you are the engine, when the engine dies, the rest of the economies around the world suffer because of it. In 1929, the US stock market seemed to be doing pretty well. It's known as the Dow Jones Industrials, and you can go to it anytime. If you just go Google Dow Jones, it'll tell you what the current value is. I don't know what to call it. It's an indices based off of points. I think it's currently at this point, as I'm recording this, like 32,000. But back in the day, you can see 360 points was the high. It was just above that going into September of 1929. Now, the problem is that all through the 1920s, everything seemed to be going pretty well. People were buying, people were having a great time. It's called the Roaring 20s for a reason. But what was going on is that people were buying stocks on what was known as margin, meaning that if a stock was $100, they would give $10 in cash or whatnot, and then they would borrow the 90 on margin, basically thinking that the stock would go higher. So it would go to 200, 300. They would sell it at that price of 300. They would pay back the $90 that they had borrowed or gotten a loan out for, and they would still made a nice profit. Unfortunately, it's an inflated bubble, and bubbles tend to pop. Well, in October of 1929, the stock started sliding. This bubble started to deflate. And when that happened, the stock prices started coming down, which meant that people realized that all of a sudden they were going to have to pay back what was owed to the people that got loans. So they are going to now have to, on that $100 stock, not just make up for the $10 that they're going to lose from the $10 they had, but $90 that they got a loan from. That is going to create a huge crisis in the economy. The stock market's going to crash, and as you can see, it dropped below 220 points. It is a huge sell-off, and it becomes a domino effect for the rest of the world. The stocks become worthless for a lot of companies. A lot of companies go out of business. A lot of people are going to lose their money. 3 years into this crisis, in 1932, over 9 million people have lost all the money in their savings accounts. Now, they didn't have the safety nets that we have now today. Today, the FDIC will insure up to $250,000 in any deposit that you have in an account. So depending on if you have a savings, a checking, or both, you get your money up to $250,000 no matter what happens to that bank. The problem is that they didn't have these things at this point. Those are going to be put into place throughout the 1930s by the US government to help kind of save and protect the US economy. By 1933, 4 years into this crisis, 25% of all Americans are going to be unemployed. These are going to have huge repercussions because of the fact that with people out of work and people not having cash, people are not buying things. They're trying to find jobs, but because people aren't buying things, that means things aren't being made. It's a cycle, and unfortunately, this leads to long lines at bread and soup kitchens, as well as jobless place or job places where they're trying to find people work. One of the things that happens is that countries basically kind of stop interacting with each other in the terms of trade. The US decided that they were going to stop importing things because they figured that if they could make those things that they imported, that they could get people back to work. The problem is that by this point, the world is so interconnected because of trade, because people get things from different areas and different regions, that once the US stopped buying imports, then the rest of the world does the same thing. Everybody stops buying from everybody else. And that is going to have a huge impact on trade in general. How bad does it get? Well, the global market is going to suffer. The trade around the world is going to drop 65%. That's basically 2/3 of all trade is like no more. And because of that, people aren't making things that are going to be exported to any place else now. That means unemployment around the world is going to shoot up. We already said that the United States experienced a 25% unemployment rate. Germany is going to experience a 30% unemployment rate by 1932, and Great Britain will have an unemployment rate of 23%. If you look at the two graphs, the top one is the United States. You can see how it was so low in 1929, only 3.2% of the population was unemployed. It shoots up to 24%. You look at the bottom one, that's Germany's unemployment. And Germany already had some issues financially going on in the 1920s, which we'll talk about. But they were still only about 10% before the global crisis hits, and then they skyrocket up to 30% themselves. So what was going on in Germany? We know that at the end of World War I, that the Kaiser is going to basically abdicate his rule in Germany, and there's going to be a new interim government that takes over. It's known as the Weimar Republic. They're the ones who sign off on the Treaty of Versailles. They're the ones who kind of do all the ceasefires and make all the treaties with everybody else. But they're a very weak government. They're not very strong. They're not very good at managing the economy. And the German people basically blame their government for everything. They blame them for signing the treaty. They say, this is just humiliation, and you are the ones who are saying that we're defeated. Because of the Treaty of Versailles, remember, the Germans are going to have to pay an extraordinary amount of money back to the Allies, $33 billion over 30 years. Well, how do you get $33 billion? Usually, your economies have to grow in order for you to make that money. But you know that Germany has been destroyed by war. So they don't have a very strong economy after World War I. Their factories are down, and they're going to have to basically rebuild their factories just to get goods produced. Because of this, the government of Germany at this time decides that they're just going to print money to pay back the Allies. This is not a good idea. If you know anything about economics, when you print more money and you have more money floating out there, that causes the value of your currency to go down, while also increasing the prices, because now it takes more of those currencies to buy products. It gets really bad in Germany. How bad, Mr. Hudson? Well, I'm going to show you. Germany had what were known as marks. And you can see here on this chart, 1 gold mark equaled 1 Reichsmark. Okay. This is from 1918 to 1924. So think of it basically as like $1. Okay, 1 mark equals $1 kind of thing. So the Germans are printing all this money to pay for their war. They just kept printing that money so that they could pay back the Allies, which is not doing any good. In 1918, a loaf of bread will cost basically less than 1 mark. In 1922, that's 4 years later, bread cost more than 160 marks. And by 1923, it has gotten so bad with the inflation that it takes 200 billion marks to buy one loaf of bread. So basically, your currency is worth nothing, and you're hoping that you can get some products and services. If you look at the chart, all it's doing is showing you like how it goes from basically one mark, equaling gold equaling 1 mark, to where it shoots up by 1923. So the Germans are in no position to have a stable economy. It gets to the point where they actually borrow money from the United States to stabilize their economy, and then they use some of that money from the United States in order to pay back France and Great Britain for the cost of the war. So in actuality, it is a terrible government that doesn't do very well, and that's going to cause problems later on, especially when you get to elections for new governments. This is how bad it is in Germany. Their paper is, or their money is worthless, and so they use it for different things. In the left picture, you can see they're using it as wallpaper, and there have been stories of families who have gone to renovate old houses and apartments in Germany where they peeled back old wallpaper, and there's actually these old German marks that have been used for wallpaper, which is kind of crazy, right? You can see in the middle picture that the kids were using it as building blocks, as toys, and then on the right, basically, people just used it to burn, to create fire because they needed heat when they didn't have any firewood. So that's how horrible the economy was, that their money is worthless. So you got to think about the fact, when something of this magnitude happens and people don't have money, people don't have jobs, how do you fix it? What should the government do? Because you have the stock market crash in the United States. Germany was already a mess with their economy, and now it's going to get even worse because of the global crisis. So Germany, like I said, they're borrowing money from the United States, which the United States already having its own issues, but yeah, they're, passing out foreign aid to them. Great Britain decides that they're going to pass these high tariffs, meaning that they're going to put taxes on anything that's coming in for imports. Yeah, there's still some trade going on, but it's going to cost you a ton more money to buy those things. They also increase taxes on people to try and get more money into their treasury. And then they're going to try and regulate the currency. Regulating currency is probably one of the worst things you can do, because you try and pin it at a value and it doesn't always work, and it can create bubbles and whatnot. So China likes to do that, unfortunately. So it makes their economy look like it's growing bigger than it really is. It's not. France passes a series of reforms. They're trying to help their workers. They try and establish work systems and pensions to help make sure that people are getting paid and that people are getting fed. The United States, under the presidency of FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, who comes in office after the 1932 elections, he gets a Congress to pass what's known as the New Deal. This is a whole series of different things that they can do in order to try and get the economy back on track. They pass what are these large public works projects. So things like the Tennessee Valley Authority, where they do bridges and dams to control rivers. They have the Hoover Dam, which is built, as you can see in the picture. They have welfare, which is enacted. Welfare is supposed to take care of widows from World War I, as well as orphans. And you have Social Security, which is also there for these widows and orphans, which will eventually become a retirement system that is being used currently in the United States. The question becomes, does it work? And there are a lot of historians on both sides that debate whether the actions that the countries are taking actually helped, or if they just prolonged the financial crisis. And the reasoning was that businesses go in a cycle of peaks and valleys. And that's just how it is. You have good times, you have bad times. And as you adapt to the business environment, you change things in order to succeed. And those businesses that succeed will continue growing. Those businesses that don't, they will fold and either be taken on by another company, or they'll just be shut down entirely. So the historians look at these things and they wonder if there was a very good effect coming out of these government programs. Yes, there are some things that are definitely good, like having the FDIC, which monitors the banking system, and it basically guarantees up to so much money so that people aren't just completely broke if something happens in the banking system. And there's other things that they've done, including the stock market, where they have what are called breakers to prevent a sudden super drop of the Dow value, so that people don't do a run on their stocks and you end up having like a crash like happened in October of 1929. So just to kind of give you an idea of some similarities, in 2020, there was the start of the coronavirus pandemic. And you can see here, this is the Dow Jones Industrials. It was going along pretty well. It was almost up to 30,000 points. And as the pandemic increased and the country started shutting down, you can see that it had a precipitous drop to where it basically dropped over 10,000 points over the course of a month. And while it did recover and come back, because it's, as of this recording, it's at like 32,000, like I said, it was a shock to the system, and the government itself had to make decisions about what to do. And what does the government do? The government does relief packages that they call the COVID relief packages. They spend over $4 trillion in trying to support different programs, the people, help support people who are unemployed, who couldn't work because of it. The airline shut down, the cruise industry shut down, movie theaters shut down. A lot of businesses shut down, and all of a sudden people were out of work, and they needed something to do. They needed to get paid so that they could survive. So you have all these different programs that were implemented in order to allow people, a chance to survive without losing all their money. So you saw the stimulus checks go out. Small businesses were getting funded. Education was being funded. People are getting better unemployment benefits to help them out. So as the government does things, you have to understand whether or not it really does help or not. And as the pandemic has eased and people have gone back to their daily lives after this coronavirus pandemic, the question is, did these relief packages help, or could different things have been done to help out? So there's just some similarities with what happened in the 1929 crash and then what was going on with the pandemic. Of course, one is, one that was bought on margin. That's the 1929 crash. This one was a self-inflicted shutdown. So, there's some differences right there. But if we see this happening again, you learn from history. So maybe the government will try different things in order to protect the consumers, but also try and figure out a way to navigate out of a crisis such as that. That's the global crisis, the global depression that started with the crash of the U.S. stock market in 1929 and has ripple effects across the world. This is going to lead into new governments arising in the 1930s all around the world, bringing some dictators, which obviously is not a good thing. And that's going to lead to basically an aggressive new regime in different places, which will eventually lead us to two. So there you go. If you like this video, make sure that you hit like and subscribe. And then here's your social tip for the day. Help out your family members. Doing the simple chores, doing simple tasks helps relieve everybody. Be a part of it, whether it's, helping clean dishes, vacuuming, mopping, anything like that, even taking out the trash. something as simple as, doing things of that nature, it really helps to put your role in your family and show how much you appreciate them, and that, you're part of them as well. So until next time, have a great one. This has been HUD's History.